I'm Whitey Willauer, and this is the latest edition of Front Up, and I have a great guest today, and her name is Julie Kingston. Julie, tell us why you're here, besides being invited.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I'm here today to talk about the Drug-Free Community Grant that was recently awarded to the Alliance for Substance Abuse Prevention. And that grant is in the amount of $625,000.
For 1 year?
No, that's over 5 years,
5 years.
$125,000 a year.
That means you have a job for 5 years?
If all goes well, I hope so.
Well, that's great.
That's the intention, and the premise of the Drug-Free Community Grant is to work with all of the sectors of the community to address issues related to underage drinking and access to alcohol for those who are underage.
So it's focused on the kids rather than the adults?
Initially, the premise of the first year of the grant is to work specifically on issues related to youth and underage drinking. But the overall thinking is that as the grant rolls out over the next 2 to 3 years, that we begin to incorporate issues around the same substances, alcohol, prescription drugs, and marijuana use, that may also affect the adult community.
Now, who awarded this grant?
This funding was put in place by the White House Office of the National Drug Control Policy.
Wow. You're going right up. That's pretty,
a mouthful.
That's pretty impressive.
It is impressive.
So you work for the White House?
I guess you could say that. Actually, I work for the people, but and the White House, I guess, represents the people. But yeah, so it's. I think it's exciting in that it really brings the issues down to the local level and encourages people to identify the issues as they perceive it. You know, what myself as an adult or as a parent may see as an issue in the community may be different as it's perceived by the faith community, by young people themselves. So everyone has their own perception or their own lens with which they see the issues, and also their own ideas around what strategies or what approaches would best work to address particular issues.
Why Nantucket? Yeah, we're just a small little island in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. How did we get selected?
Actually, the process, as I understand it, there were over 350 grants that were written and submitted for consideration, and 162 or 165 were selected. So the competition was pretty significant. I think Nantucket...
Did everybody get 625,000 or?
It depends. There's a combination of new grants that were given out in addition to other coalitions who had already completed 5 years of work around the similar issues that applied for continued funding, and they can get an additional year up to 10 years altogether. So there was a combination of grants that were awarded. For Nantucket, it was a first-time award of
Is it because we have a particular problem here, or you know, how do we get these grants?
Well, I think the grant was premised on a number of initiatives that the Alliance for Substance Abuse Prevention Coalition, and it's not just one body, it's a combination of you know, the school, parents, the faith community, the AIDS Network, Safe Place, Boys and Girls Club, anyone who basically had an interest or who is invested in the overall health and well-being of the community has come together. And they have done a number of things over the last, I guess, 10 to 12 years. I understand the coalition's been around for a number of years. So they've done things like Sticker Shock and Red Ribbon campaign, but also 3 to 4 years ago they introduced a youth risk behavior survey at the high school. And by going through that process, the coalition was able to collect a lot of useful information about the behaviors that youth are engaged in, to begin to determine whether there were or were not concerns that needed to be addressed through, you know, prevention initiatives or through education. So by profiling those results, it was determined that there were a number of significant issues, at least within the student population, that were cause for concern.
Let me ask you something now.
Okay.
Are the drugs or the alcohol the most important problem? How do we stack up?
I think in terms of the state of Massachusetts, we have higher than average levels of youth usage compared to other communities or other areas within the state, but also comparing state to state, we're also above the average in a number of areas in terms of underage drinking, binge drinking, and also I think the other issue that's recently been questioned, and I think anyone who reads the school newspaper, the Veritas, just before Christmas, I think it was the November edition, Georgie Morley wrote a really interesting and compelling editorial that sort of bumped the discussion around underage drinking and access to alcohol to a different level in terms of questioning the roles that adults play in terms of providing opportunities for kids to drink underage, either by directly providing access or providing a forum for youth to drink underage. Or also, I would suggest that, when we remain silent, we are often giving permission. So by adults not stepping in and saying, I'm not comfortable with this, or I can't accept this or permit this, because not only is it illegal, it's irresponsible. So, from the student perspective or from a young person's perspective, for Georgie to step up to the table and say, as adults, as parents, as leaders in the community, that we have a responsibility to, set, I suppose, the bar and to do what our job is as parents and adults.
Well, how are you going to implement something like that? How are you going to get the parents to take ownership of this situation?
It's been interesting as, I've been in the position for a little over a month. So my first job, I guess, was to begin to get out there and to talk with people about the issues and to generate discussions around, people's perceptions or understanding of what the issues are, what the solutions are. And it's interesting that there are a number of people, adults, who readily acknowledge that there is an unhealthy relationship that islanders have with alcohol in particular, and that they have a responsibility to begin to examine their own behaviors, their own choices, and to, I think, step back and look at, are there ways that we can create opportunities for youth to grow up and still enjoy themselves, still have fun, without engaging in the use of alcohol or drugs. So there are a lot of parents who are already there, who are on board, either through personal experiences they may have, or by generally becoming more aware of what the issues are. If their parents, as their kids get older, there's that direct experience that they may be faced with in terms of their own youth, engaging in risky behavior. And
do you think Nantucket is more permissive than other locations as far as the use of alcohol and drugs are concerned?
I'm an outsider, so I'm really,
well, that's
I'm taking the opportunity to sort of step back. I come from an island community as well, just from another country. So
what does that just
from Newfoundland, Canada is where I'm from.
Okay.
So just comparing.
You're a Newfoundlander.
I'm a Newfoundlander.
Newfoundlander. Okay.
Yeah. So there are cultural similarities when you look at the island communities, but I think communities are similar in a lot of respects. That because we're smaller, because we may be rural, because we're an island, does not insulate us or lessen the risk factors for ourselves.
Yeah.
The other thing that has, as people know, is we're a resort community. So you have this other dimension that changes the whole
very permissive. You know, you come
Absolutely.
here to have a good time, and
Absolutely.
we don't want to destroy the idea that this is
Right.
a destination resort.
Right.
But then again, there's a downside to that.
Absolutely, and it's a fine balance.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the issue is not that we are saying to people, you know, we don't want you to drink. What we're saying is it's about being responsible, about making good choices, and also about, you know, in particular around adolescents, is recognizing that, you know, alcohol is not something that they need in their bodies as they're growing up. You know, there are detrimental health effects of it, socially, the impact of using substances.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and then there, of course, there could be legal complications. Academically, it can affect
But that's
young
the
people.
stick. What's the carrot?
What's the carrot?
Yeah. In other words, if my friends are drinking and drugging, you know, and if I don't, then I'm sort of an oddball.
Right.
Yeah. How do you
I-
combat that?
I think that's a reality. I mean, those conversations really need to be had with parents and with young people, because that is a challenge for them. I think people's perceptions are not always there's not always evidence to support what people believe is actually happening. Sometimes we overestimate. Sometimes youth believe, and adults believe, that more kids are using than they actually are. So there's, you know, we need to do some work around making sure that people understand what the actual results are, or the actual norms are
Yeah.
in the community.
Mm-hmm.
Not to discount the fact that even if we say 60% of youth have not binge drank in the last 30 days, that we should ignore the 40% that have.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think it's about striking a balance. Both of those realities need to be addressed differently. But I think, you know, to go back to your question, was what's the carrot?
Yes.
I think part of it is engaging youth in creating, youth in particular, but in creating dialogues and conversations and solutions that they feel are right for them. I think you know, the danger is, as adults and as coalitions sometimes, that we believe we know all the answers, and that is not always true. I think if we create, you know, initiatives and come up with ideas without actually working with the people that we need to bring on board, specifically youth, and listening to what they have to say, because there's value and there's credibility to their experiences, and they are more aware of what is going on than we are as adults. We hear bits and pieces, but, you know, really they are the go-to people for us. So it's about bringing them on board as equals, not as, you know, we've got a youth here, so we're going to ask them what the, you know, the issues are and the suggestions, because one doesn't represent all. You know, we have a diverse culture here, so we need to bring all of the cultures on board and to fully integrate all segments of the community into this process, because we're all vested into it.
What are some of the strategies that you've been contemplating that might be very productive?
There are a couple of ideas that have recently come about. And one of the things that I am starting to work on with a couple of senior high school students is the idea of creating a youth council, or perhaps a SAD chapter at the middle school level. There is one already.
SAD is?
Students Against Destructive Decisions.
Okay.
And
it's not drunk driving.
It's not, but it was a spin-off from the initial MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Driving. And then students decided to take on the initiative, and it became Students Against Destructive Decision, which is a double negative, but the intentions are right. And it's really about youth coming together to talk about ways that they contribute positively, not only to the community, but to their peers, and they help one another to work collaboratively around creating initiatives that are interesting to them and that they want to participate in.
Do the kids like to do this?
It's a tough call because there are, you know, sometimes I think we focus on the natural leaders, the kids who are already, you know, visible, who are sitting on committees or are really active. They're important, but I think, you know, often we need to create opportunities for kids to become leaders, whether through different activities that can make them feel more confident and more empowered, and to often recognize that they have talents and abilities that they can bring to the table. Not necessarily that they have to do everything, but in order for you know, a community to really mobilize and work well around an issue, we need to have a good cross-section of individuals who bring a variety of skills and talents to the table.
Yeah.
You know, we need the thinkers, we need the doers, we need, you know, people who are innovative and creative. Technology, that's the big challenge for me in terms of kids being so connected to technology and social networking.
Is that good news or bad news?
It's good news because I have 2 kids of my own, so so I have a technical support team that sort of helps me. But in terms of my work directly with youth at the school in particular, you know, it's their job to educate me, really. You know, when I'm invited in to work with a group of young people or any people for that matter, it's a privilege to be able to sit down with them, and it's really important that I'm not there as an expert. I'm there to listen. I'm there to support or facilitate, and I'm there to, you know, sometimes do the legwork for people who, for students in particular, you know, their timetables are hectic, they're busy in sports. So I may do some of I'm their secretary, and I type up the little memos and send the drafts off to them, and they look at them and say yes or no.
And you can communicate by the internet with the kids.
We do. Yeah. Internet is big. You know, and also the kids are the best ones to get the message out to their peers.
Yeah.
So, you know, they're so savvy and so connected through texting or emailing or Facebooking. You know, so I think in terms of how we communicate and get the word out, that we have to be aware that, you know, how you and I may communicate, we may, sometimes we may pick up the phone, but, you know, emailing and all of the other social media forums are ways to connect with kids. And also I think that if they have the skills to be able to create the Facebook pages or the fan pages, to design posters, to coordinate events. And I think, you know, in order for kids not to just feel connected, but for kids to feel that there's connectedness. And I think there's a difference, because connectedness means that they feel empowered, that it's not only what they say, but it's that they've actually had an opportunity to shape. And I really think that that's key, you know, because kids are savvy. They know if they're just at the table and no one's going to listen, that they need to actually have an opportunity to shape and to create and to push this forward. Because, you know, in terms of, you know, when you're creating change, we all need to be working together, and that requires that as adults we need to step back sometimes and pay attention to what's being said and to listen.
That's great. Now, you're here on Nantucket. You came from Canada.
I did.
And how come you came all the way from Newfoundland down to Nantucket? What was the draw here?
Oh, I have a husband here.
Okay.
So my husband's Babuccino, and he is the culinary arts teacher at the high school. And it's interesting because when I come into the classroom, his classroom in particular, and watch him work and interact with his students, he's very much about the kids. He's so invested in what he does. He's invested in the community, but he also has such a wonderful way of pulling the strengths out of kids and encouraging them to try something different, and builds those relationships with them that are so important. You know, I think the other issue is that over the last number of years there have been some suicides on the island that have pulled people together in terms of, you know, trying to find ways to not only support one another, but, you know, through the work of Jenny Garneau and the post-traumatic stress management team to really create opportunities for the community to come together and to find unique solutions. So, you know, relationships with kids and Bob, you know.
That's great, but how come you were up there and he was here? I mean, how did that work out?
That didn't work out very well, which is
how long
why.
have you been married?
We've been married 2 years. It'll be 2 years February 21st.
Oh, I see. So you have 2 kids.
I have 2 kids who are younger.
Okay, and they're in school here?
They're in school. Ash is in elementary school and Avery's in the middle school. He'll be going into grade 9 and Ash will be going into grade 6 in September.
Okay.
And Bob's children are older, and Andy Buccino actually is on the island. He works as a contractor, and his daughter's in Connecticut. Wow. So we have 4 kids altogether.
Well, that's interesting. What do your kids do in school?
What do they do in school? Avery, well, both are into hockey. Ash is...
Hockey because of Canada?
Possibly.
Were they recruited for the hockey team?
No, well, not really, although I think they might like to think that they were. But, you know, hockey is something I think that has been important to them in terms of, again, creating that feeling of belonging, the team sport. Avery's a goalie, so there was a little bit of a necessity to have a goalie down here. So whether I can tell him he was drafted or not, you know.
Tell him he was drafted.
I will.
Okay, that's great.
And Ash has joined up with hockey this year, but also is really interested in chess. So he's, you know, often out and about during the summer on the chess circuit down at the Athenaeum. And
so they really found something to attract them.
They found their niche, absolutely. And you know, I think it's important that, again, we give kids opportunities to become involved in things that are positive. There are a lot of great things. I'm not here to say that, you know, the island's in terrible shape or falling apart. There are a lot of really good things that are happening on the island as well. And I was really impressed when I came here that there were so many different programs or services and initiatives that were happening, you know, to support the island communities and to try to create change and to support people in making this and keeping this a safe and healthy place for people to live and to visit. You know, not to say that there aren't issues, because there are, but you know, the issues are everywhere as well. It's not just Nantucket based.
Well, you've grabbed a big issue.
It's huge.
And
it is huge.
And I think it's wonderful.
Thank you.
And I hope that you are very successful in your ventures here.
Thank you.
And I want to thank you very much for coming here, and especially when you're fresh caught. You know, you've been here a very short period of time, and you haven't probably figured out all of the ins and outs of the thing. And I just thank you very much for coming here today, and I'm sure we'll have you back in the not too distant future to tell us the next rendition of what's going on.
Thank you very much.
Thank
I appreciate
you.
that.
Appreciate your being here, Julie.